Welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Dr. Jeff Musgrave, Doctor of Physical Therapy. Super excited to be with you here on the PT on Ice Daily Show, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. It is Wednesday, so it is all things geriatrics. And I'm going to be covering a case study for you from a recent personal training client. So I work primarily in the context of fitness now, and I was doing a personal training session for a client in their mid-70s, having some just in general in their fitness journey. They've been weight training and working with us for about 4 years and just needed a boost. They needed some one-on-one instruction, needed some encouragement to push a bit harder and to really challenge themselves. So she signed up for some one-on-one sessions. In the first session, we had planned to do some deadlifting. She mentioned that she was having some pain with deadlifting. So in her warm-up, we've got a progressive warm-up starting with some hip hinging. And when I first was watching her hinge, I noticed that she had some change in spine motion. And we know that there's a zone of tolerance, especially for older adults, where all our pieces parts don't have full range of motion anymore, or we may have fixed deformities. But for her, it wasn't that her back was in a flexed position and it was staying the same. At the end of this good morning or hip hinge motion, she was getting some change in spine flexion. So my first thought is this is probably part of the issue with her deadlifting. She also mentioned she was getting the same discomfort in her low back when she was using the rower. So sounds pretty clear. We see a movement fault. She's having discomfort. We see a change in spine motion. So first thing I do is film her. Because she can't see, we don't have mirrors at Stronger Life where I coach. So I filmed her and then I started giving her some cues. So I told her what was happening, gave her a visual demonstration myself, also filmed her later for some review and showed her, once you get to this point, it looks, this is what's happening. And showed her that change in spine position and then showed her, here's what we want to happen. She's like, oh, okay. Because she couldn't feel it, couldn't see it. It got a little bit better, not much. So I gave her one verbal cue. I said, butt back to the wall. And that seemed to help a little bit. Her knees were still a little bit stiff. At this point, I had her review some footage of her doing the hinge. So she was hinging. She could see a little bit of improvement. And then I gave her another verbal cue. That one had helped, but didn't quite get the job done. So I said, I want you to soften your knees because her knees were a bit too extended. She was using up all the range of motion she had in her knees. The hip hinge had stopped. She had gobbled up her hip flexion. And now all we were getting at the bottom of that good morning was lumbar flexion. And of course, under load, we don't prefer that. Not the most efficient way to lift. With enough reps, probably is causing her issue. So continue to do some coaching there. That cue really seemed to help. Gave her some more, showed her that final rep that was good. And then I just started marking good reps, still working on just that good morning. So this happened pretty quickly. A couple reps. Okay. Here's the visual feedback. Here's the verbal cue. A few reps with just that one cue, a few more reps, a few more, gave her the video to review. We looked at that. And then once she got it, all I did was mark that good movement. That's it. Do that again. And that was it. And tried to stay as silent as possible. If you know me, that's hard. Most of us as clinicians, that's a challenge to be quiet and just let our members move. But she's in a no threat environment, right? She can do some ugly reps. It's not a big deal. So also in her warm up, I had her working on rowing because we've got deadlift. So great way to get the heart rate up, continue to work on that hip hinge pattern. And she had mentioned she was having some discomfort on the row. So her hip hinge looked okay, but noticed some of the same issues. So had her focus on keeping an upright chest, using some of our other cues. I actually did a little bit of video of her on the rower, gave her that for demonstration. Now, oftentimes, clinically, in my past, I would stop there. I would say, sweet, We got this down. Let's stop there. Just work on the unloaded hip hinge. And that is not what we want to do with older adults. We know that there is only so much time to build reserve and resiliency for our older adults. And we're kind of making an assumption here when we stop there. Because if there's pain with the movement, we just assume load is going to make the problem worse. But the problem wasn't necessarily the load, it was the load plus a movement efficiency, that movement fault, that change in spine position. Enough reps, enough load, plus that problem could be an issue. So now that we fixed the movement problem, why not progressively load it and test it? Because we know we don't have time to waste. We only have so much time to build reserve and resiliency. And that is truly what the key is for helping our older adults age well. So once that was done, empty barbell, reinforce the same pattern, things look pretty good. Now that we introduced load, I did give her an extra cue to make sure that she's holding her tummy tight. So to do that, I like the brace your tummy like I'm going to punch you in the belly. That is my favorite. Sometimes I'll gesture or motion to them. That usually seems to really drive the point home because I want to make sure she's maintaining that spine position, especially as we progressively add load. So we continued to go up. We continued the same plan. Her form looked pretty good. There was a very minor change at the bottom of the lift, especially when she would go down to kind of reset. So we just reinforced holding that core position really tight, making sure she had a good bracing pattern, that she was breathing. She was a rock star, keeping the bar close. We continued to progressively load the lift with no pain. So she actually went within 20 pounds of her PR. So most people are not familiar with Super Sue, we affectionately call her. She is just phenomenal. Only been really weight training for 4 years, but she's gotten above body weight deadlift, and she actually reached body weight deadlift over 120 pounds for her on that session with no pain during and no pain after, which I think is beautiful. And, you know, does it always happen this way? No. This is a case study, right? It's an N of one. It is one experience to share, but I think it's an important one. Based on my prior experience, I probably would have stopped loading her or would have very minimally loaded her and sent her home. But because we were watching her form and monitoring symptoms, she had no discomfort during, we just continually progressively added load to her. Now, sometimes load is the problem. Sometimes it's range of motion, right? We could have also probably cut her range of motion short, but we were able to do the range of motion and just progressively add load. And I think something that we tend to forget sometimes as clinicians is that load can be instructional. There are certain things in our technique that become not an option when the weight gets heavy enough. And I think as long as we're conscientious to watch form, we can use load to be instructional in nature. We can go ahead and get the benefits that we want from our clients. We can go ahead and load heavy as long as we monitor and we're conscientious of how they're moving. So pretty straightforward. Sometimes I think we make this stuff too difficult. I think we make some assumptions that load is going to equal pain, which is a very dangerous thing to do for older adults. We know that if we want them to live long, healthy lives and be resilient, they need to be moving heavy loads, whether we're thinking about bone density, sarcopenia, whether we're thinking about 1 rep max living, where they can barely do activities of daily living. All the literature basically summarized to just paint this with a very broad stroke is very well summarized by Mark Ripetoe's quote. You've probably heard 1,000 times. And if you haven't, I'm happy to share it with you. Stronger people are harder to kill. And they're also more useful for themselves, for others. So don't assume that load is going to be the issue. Just to break this down very simply, correct. If we're going to break this down into steps, you see a movement fault, you're pretty confident that's issue 1. Correct the fault 1 cue at a time. 1 cue at a time. Put them in a scenario where they can do some ugly reps, where you're not worried about them flaring up their symptoms. For Sue, that was doing an unweighted good morning. And then we also did the same thing on the rower. Then we went empty barbell. Empty barbell, we were using a 25-pound shorty bar, and we got her up to over 100 pounds. That's less than 10% of her load. I'm not worried about some ugly reps happening there. As she continued to do better and maintain that spine position, she was fine. Oh, good question in here. Graded exposure into lumbar flexion, or will you not? So I'm not treating her in the context of formal physical therapy, but in fitness. But that would be a great thing to work on, so that she does get some graded exposure into flexion. So great question here live. Will you do some graded exposure into flexion? Why or why not? That would be a great plan. I may actually add that in now that you mention it, because that is a missing piece in her program. Although that's not the primary function, that is going to be the best thing for her long term. So we may work on some Jefferson curls, and some other progressive lumbar flexion. Second piece, first piece, we want to show them first. Videos are really nice. Video demonstration, we can show them the reps, we can show them the progression. You can see here, you can slow it down. I love that you can just put your finger on there and basically do a slow-mo version and point out exactly what you do or don't want to see in this rep versus that rep. Can you see here at the bottom of the deadlift? Here's where we see it. Yep. Good, good, good. Nope. There it is. And now see the second rep. See how you did this. Great. Show first. Very simply, I love show, tell, and then touch if you must, right? So show them, tell them, give them a verbal cue, hopefully externally based, like butt back to the wall. Brace your belly like you're going to take a punch. And then the third piece is if a tactile cue will be helpful, you can add it in then. So do that first. And secondly, progressively load it and see what happens. If you're working under an assumption, if you don't have a clear clinical history of load causing pain, go ahead and load it. See what you get. Maybe you can load it through partial range of motion, or maybe you can do some type of movement modification. For this member, didn't need any of that. We corrected the fault. We progressively loaded. She did great. So hope for the best, prepare for the worst, right? And then the third piece is symptom irritability is different from every patient. So we're always watching symptom irritability. We want to know, how are they responding to load? How are they responding to reps? In this case, once the fault was corrected, there was no issue. Pretty straightforward, pretty cut and dry. Is this going to happen every time? Absolutely not. Are there more complicated cases? Yes. But I think on the outset, you hear someone in their mid-70s, pain with deadlifting. Are we going to hit a near PR deadlift on that session? You would probably assume no. And especially with older adults, we tend to be more cautious, and we do them a huge disservice in making an assumption instead of making an assessment. Team, I hope that was helpful. I hope that gives you some confidence to stick to your guns. Do the basics really well. There wasn't anything spectacularly different in this session. It's just being patient, checking it unloaded, doing our verbal cues, our visual demonstration, show them, tell them, touch if you must, progressively load it, see what happens. Oftentimes, it's very simple. I hope this was helpful. If you have any other thoughts, any similar experiences or cool cases you want to share, please share in the comments. I'll be happy to interact with you and spitball on cases, or just share some experiences. If you're looking to check out Older Adult live, there is only one more opportunity on the road. That is going to be in Loveland, Ohio on December 8th. Last time I checked, there's still a few spots. So if you're in the area and you want to catch MMOA live on the road, that is your last opportunity. Next cohorts for level 1 and level 2 online 8-week courses. Level 1 is going to launch on January 6th. And then January 7th, if you've already got level 1 under your belt, you're looking to round out the online courses with level 2. That will launch on January 7th. Team, I hope this was helpful. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and we will catch you next time.